airplanes, flatulent cows, and for good measure, tearing down all of our buildings. Yes, those are just some of the modest proposals included inside Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez's Green New Raw Deal. We're going to explain what it means for you and why 2020 Dems are embarrassingly lining up behind it. Plus, Adam Schiff takes aim at Devin Nunes over what he claims was an incomplete Russia inquiry. Well, Congressman Nunes is here to react, and a few more tidbits in there. And the court, yes, is in session. Will I wear that doily around my neck? You're going to have to wait to see that. And now, in tonight's case of the arbiter, the case of a veteran being denied the right to fly the American flag. I kid you not. 2 lawyers take up the case, and the judge, namely me, will have a ruling. But first, the rise of the PC Puritans, Part 2. That's the focus of tonight's angle. Another day, another liberal icon caught up in the sensitivity trap.
Is that you, Joy?
Oh, you know this picture.
Oh, Joy, is that you?
Yes.
Joy, that is you?
Yes.
Joy, are you black?
No, I know.
Are you Mama? See, Joy?
No. It was a Halloween party. I went as a beautiful African woman.
Oh, yes, you ain't black.
But that's my hair. That's my hair.
That, you can be, yeah, but it is.
So the whole point of
why
it is
are you
that curly
upset with
hair
me
is
now?
coming back.
I thought
That is me.
Did you have tanning lotion on,
A little. I had makeup that was a little bit darker than my skin.
Well, less than a week ago, it was Virginia Democrat Governor Ralph Northam, who, fresh off extolling the virtues of infanticide, was exposed for posting this photo on his med school yearbook page.
I'm deeply sorry. I cannot change the decisions I made, but I accept responsibility for my past actions, and I am ready to do the hard work of regaining your trust.
Well, he's still trying. And then it was his potential successor, Democrat Lieutenant Governor Justin Fairfax, now in his own he said, she said, lurid Me Too controversy.
It won't be corroborated because it's not true and it didn't happen the way that was portrayed.
Well, then yesterday, it was his second in line to the governorship, Democrat Attorney General Mark Herring, who tried to get out in front of his own almost 40-year-old mistake. Herring admitted that he, too, had donned blackface for a college party back in 1980 when he and his friends, quote, dressed like rappers. He apologized profusely. But Democratic leaders this week, they're running for cover.
This week has just made me sick. You know, it's just made me sick. From Friday to now, it's just been one bit of bad news after the next, and it's all been shocking and surprising.
It's sad because they have some very talented leaders there, but they have to have the confidence of the electorate, and they have to have the confidence of the legislature that they have to work with.
She should have just done that menu reading thing she was doing during the State of the Union and just ignored the question altogether. Well, look, now corporations are also worried. This week, Adidas pulled back an all-white, almost all-white sneaker because its release was deemed racist, first coinciding with Black History Month. Jeffrey Jason, who's a shoe maven, tweeted, Adidas, you're really celebrating black culture with an uncaged, all-white Ultra Boost? Well, but if tennies are racist, what about, And now the fashion house Gucci is also apologizing. Well, what's the controversy? Look at it. This bizarre sweater mask situation that covers half of the wearer's mouth. The company recalled the design from its online and physical stores after one fashionista tweeted out, Balaclava knit top by Gucci. Happy Black History Month, y'all. Look, demeaning portrayals of anyone on the basis of race or ethnicity is deplorable and should be called out as such. Yet we, as Americans, we also have to be careful not to rush in to condemn people or, frankly, businesses because of uncorroborated allegations or decades-old conduct or just disagreement about fashion. Bowing to the every demand of the politically correct Puritans puts us on a dangerous path, slippery slope, whatever you want to call it. The concern is that without some safe space to make mistakes in the past, good people won't want to be involved in public life at all. They're going to be fearful that something they said or did years ago will now be considered unforgivable and irredeemable. And back to Joy Behar. The easiest thing for me to do would be to relish this moment and grind her into the dirt for the double standard. She has been incredibly uncharitable to me personally over the years when I go on the show and so forth. But I'm not going to take that bait. I prefer to try to stick to the principle of fairness. I don't think she's a racist. I disagree with her, but I don't think she's a racist. And a goofy photo from 1972 isn't going to make me change my mind. But we all need to take a breath and evaluate patterns of behavior rather than rushing to judgment, real discriminatory conduct or intent. And for goodness sake, when we have reached a point where white tennis shoes are considered racist, maybe it's time to reconsider the shifting standards of the PC Puritans. And that's the angle. Joining me now with reaction, Dinesh D'Souza, conservative filmmaker, Niger Innes, national spokesperson for the Congress of Racial Equality, and LaDawn Jones, Democratic strategist. Niger, let's start with you. Are we already over the tipping point here of what is and what is not racist with the tennis shoe, and there are other fashion houses that are dealing with other issues? What about this?
There's a politically correct reign of terror that is actually going to end up terrorizing us all. You know, a good friend and Fox News contributor Deneen Borelli wrote in her book that if everything is racist, then nothing is. And the problem is to conflate some kids in high school wanting to give tribute to Michael Jackson or to a rapper by trying to look like them and conflating that with the historic racism that black Americans have had to deal with over the centuries actually minimizes and actually belittles the real history and what has happened to African Americans. I think we all need to take a deep breath. I mean, are we going to go into Whoopi Goldberg and Ted Danson, who were involved in a relationship, and Ted Danson actually went out in full blackface, and Whoopi Goldberg was not only not offended, she enjoyed it thoroughly and laughed about it. It was done, I think, at some type of friar's roast.
Well, there's a lot
I think
of
we all need to take a
yeah.
deep breath and realize how far we've come on racial relations in our
LaDawn, I
country.
assume you disagree with Niger.
I absolutely disagree. So, first of all, we know we will not be able to get everyone to agree 100% on any issue, particularly on race in America. However, the problem that you're missing is that we're worried about, well, isn't it time for us to get over it? Instead of taking a moment to really realize, why is this an issue? I think that there are too many Americans who are not realizing that the racist overtones, the racist history has to be acknowledged first. We're just passing it over like, oh, it was just the 80s. Oh, it was just a little bit of dark makeup.
Do you think Joy Behar is racist for having gone in a Halloween costume, as she said, as a beautiful African woman? I mean, she's pretty big liberal.
So I will not say anyone, including the governor of Virginia, is racist based on one photo. That does not make racism based on one photo. But what it does do is make insensitivity. And when you have a platform, when you have an opportunity to talk about these issues, whether they happened yesterday or in the past, it's necessary to do it instead of just pushing it off like Megyn Kelly and saying, oh, it's no big deal. I just thought, it was just makeup.
Dinesh, Eric Dyson, political analyst, had an interesting comment about the privilege issue and the blackface issue. Let's watch.
This shows the vast reaches of ignorance, the magnitude of unconsciousness that many white people have and are allowed to have. So when we talk about white privilege, count this as one. When people say, I don't understand it, the fact that you don't have to know about blackface, the fact that you don't have to know the consequences of racial intolerance are indicative of a serious kind of white privilege that we need to attack.
Dinesh, I know you're heading to Dartmouth, our alma mater. You're going to give a speech on Monday. You're probably going to be asked a lot of questions about issues like this. But what about what he said? Like, a person who is white cannot understand what that image does to the psyche of an African-American person with all the history that, of course, we acknowledge or should acknowledge.
Well, I think that the issue that Dyson is sidelining here, and really the big surprise of all this, is that these examples, you may say, of shocking insensitivity, if you want to call it that, are coming from the Democrats and from the progressives. Gucci and Adidas are very progressive corporations. Joy Behar is on the left. Ralph Northam is a Democrat. Mark Herring is a Democrat. So, you know, we've been told for a whole generation now that the parties switch sides. The Democrats might have been racist 100 years ago, but the racism is now metamorphosed into the Republican Party. The racist Democrats became Republican. Now, I've been maintaining in my movies, in my books, that this is not so, that the racist strain remained in the Democratic Party. The racist Dixiecrats never became Republicans. And so the stuff in Virginia is a stunning vindication of that. Interestingly...
Hold on. Are you actually saying that you think Ralph Northam and the Mark Herring, the Speaker of the House, or excuse me, the Attorney General, that they're racist because of these old photos, or it was insensitive? I mean, I'm not going to say that. You think they're racist for those photos? I mean, they're bad choices.
Well, here's what I'm saying. Here's what I'm saying. I don't think one can simply focus on the photo. Look at the other side of Northam. The reason this whole thing came to light was because of Northam's shocking defense of a certain kind of infanticide, right? A certain kind of leaving the baby to die even when it's viable outside the womb. Now, let's remember, this was exactly the position of Margaret Sanger 100 years ago. So, in other words, 100 years ago, in the Democratic Party and in the progressive movement, you had on the one hand a condoning of racism, of the Ku Klux Klan, of black vaudeville, of blackface, and on the other hand, this kind of idea that human weeds, to use the phrase Margaret Sanger used, should be disposed of. Yeah. So what I'm saying is that this racism, this thread of looking at people as unwanted, of feeling that we should be able to get rid of them, this is still in the Democratic Party, and we can't lose sight of that.
Niger, Al Sharpton. Laura, hold on, I'm going to get you to get Niger, and then we'll get back to you. This is what Al Sharpton said today about the Northam controversy specifically. Let's watch.
If the governor wants to repent and grow, if the attorney general want to repent and grow, good. And the best example of that is to say I am resigning and I'm going to tour and tell people that I gave up my seat for a greater seat.
Niger, the need for repentance from Al Sharpton. Thoughts?
The irony of Al Sharpton demanding repentance for things that one said many, many years ago is rich with irony. Look, I agree with Dinesh in this one sense. Here's how the Democratic Party has not changed. It was racially obsessed 50, 100 years ago during the segregation era. It is now race and identity politics obsessed, be it race, be it gender, be it sexual orientation, be it whatever little category they want to put human beings and free individuals in. That is today's Democratic Party. And it's also a Democratic Party that is cavalier on the history of racism. When a Joe Biden can go before a black audience and say because of the policies of the Republican Party, they literally, he says, they want to put you back in chains. That shows a contempt that Vice President Joe Biden, I guess vice presidential candidate at the time, Joe Biden had for the history of black Americans in our country. And that's the problem with this. As I said earlier, quoting Deneen, if every single thing is racism, if every silly manifestation is racism, then nothing is.
I mean, LaDawn, I want you to respond to that, but let's just focus on the sneaker. It's something everyone can understand. Like, there's a sneaker released by Adidas, another very progressive company, Dinesh pointed out. They released the sneaker, I guess, in honor of Black History Month. And a lot of the sneakers, I guess, now are white, I guess. So it's like they're going back to white or white with a simple stripe. And I guess the name of certain types of sneakers, the way they're constructed, they're either caged or uncaged. That's, if you collect sneakers, that's, I guess, a big thing, caged or uncaged. I don't even know what that means, but so they're describing it. Do you think the sneaker needed to be recalled as a race because it was racist? Do you believe that? I bet you don't. That's my guess. Right or wrong?
Well, let me say this. I think what the sneaker represents is what I think all white Americans, and unlike my counterpart, it is not about Democrat or Republican. This is one of those black and white issues in America. What the Adidas represented was they don't have to understand why people think it's racist. They don't have to feel the need to be able to prove that it was or was not. They said if this is how people feel, it is not important enough for us to have this shoe to put it out. And all white Americans, whether you be Republican or Democrat, when you see these issues of race come up, and I'm not saying you have to follow every rabbit trail, the moment you say, well, I don't understand why it was racist, or that's just how it was, you are expressing white privilege. And instead of doing that, just accept it and move on. I don't have a need to say things that are racist against white people.
No, I get what you're saying.
So why can't white people just
I get what you're saying, LaDawn. I was reading a lot of the sports blog commentary on this. It was fascinating because there was actually I didn't see a big consensus on the sneaker issue. Maybe on some of the other issues, but not on that. Dinesh, finally, there are people out there saying that sexual assault is not even as bad as what's happening with some of these other controversies. This happened on a radio show. I just want to play it quickly. We're running over, but it's important to play this. Let's watch.
If it boils down to Justin Fairfax having to resign and the two blackface people don't, then those very same people will say, now, wait a minute, that's sort of a double standard.
Because, but hold on a second. Sexual assault is a crime, and blackface is awful, but it's not a crime.
The original crime was blackface on the part of Northam.
Which is awful, but it's not a crime.
Everyone said resign. Well, it's a crime to us as black people.
Obviously, that's on MSNBC. Very quickly, Dinesh.
To my view of thinking, really, it was Northam's position on infanticide that should make him resign. This is almost like the O.J. case, in which they ultimately got him for stealing his own memorabilia, but his real crime was what he did to Nicole. Similarly here, Northam's real crime is his horrific position on infanticide. I think the blackface issue might end up getting him, and it will be just desserts.
All right, everybody, thanks so much. Great panel. And coming up, the new crop of Dems don't just have different ideas than you. Well, they want to radically alter the way you live your everyday life. Again, how Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez's Green New Deal, I'm even wearing a dress that's green, could very well bankrupt us as a society. Stay there.
I don't think that we lose elections by addressing climate change. I don't think we ever have, and I don't think we ever will. We are in this together. We are 100% in this together. We have different solutions and different mechanisms, different cars we got to drive to get there.
Well, what AOC fails to mention is that different cars would mean basically 99% of those currently on the road. That's just one of the more ridiculous proposals in the draft of her Green New Deal released today. So, do you like flying across the country in 5 hours? Well, too bad. The AOC plan calls for building, quote, high-speed rail at a scale where air travel stops becoming necessary. Sorry, Hawaii. So, do you prefer to heat your home at an affordable cost? Too bad. The Green New Deal will end all traditional forms of energy in the next 10 years. Unless you think it's relegated to mere climate radicalism, check out this nugget. It would guarantee, quote, economic security for all who are unable or unwilling to work. Unwilling? Is this a fever dream? Here now, David Harsanyi, senior editor at The Federalist, and Sweta Chakraborty, fellow at the Center for Climate and Security. All right, David, 4 of the top 2020 contenders, Booker, Gillibrand, Warren, Harris, have all rushed in to support this Green New Deal. So is this a litmus test for the left?
I think it is. I mean, they jumped in and supported it before they even knew what was in it, which is something I guess Democrats occasionally do with Obamacare and other things. But now they've inadvertently now supported all these crazy, a Trojan horse filled with socialist planning on housing and food and everything else. It's going to be very hard for them to now to back out from that, I think.
The only thing I didn't see in there was what we were talking about before, clothing. That will probably, but I didn't see any clothing references, the type of clothing. Everything else was pretty much covered. All right, Swet, I want to get to you. This is what AOC said this morning. She was on this morning earlier on NPR, and then she kind of changed her tune a little bit about how much government would be required to enact this agenda. Let's watch.
Are you prepared to put on the table that, yes, actually, they're right. What this requires is massive government intervention?
It does. It does. Yeah, I have no problem saying that. One way that the right does try to mischaracterize what we're doing as though it's like some kind of massive government takeover.
Oh, listen. Whoops. I mean, she just said it was happy to say it's going to take massive government intervention. Now by the afternoon, she probably heard the heat. Some leadership. That's not going to fly with most Americans. How does this make any sense?
So the reason I support this from somebody who is really entrenched in evidence, I look at the facts, I look at the science, and this is the only policy plan I've seen put forward that commensurates with the magnitude of the challenges that we are going to be experiencing that are stemming from the planet warming. If you look at what NASA and NOAA just put out, they told us clearly that 2018 was one of the hottest years on record, making the last 4 years hottest years on record within the last 5 years. The planet is warming. We need to take some actions that are going to address that.
So well, it's pretty cold right now in Minnesota, but that's just a snapshot. I mean, it's been a brutal winter.
Yeah, well, that's weather versus
Midwest.
climate.
Yeah, well, and it was global warming. Now it's climate change. Things kind of change. Terminology changes, but I hear what you're saying. Here's what Markey said. Ed Markey's kind of the co-sponsor of all this. He was just on Tonight over at MSNBC. Let's watch.
How much spending are we talking about? Give me a ballpark figure.
Well, we don't have any specific prescriptions, but most of the role will be played by the private sector. It's the greatest single blue-collar job creation revolution in 2 generations.
David, this sounds great. I'm for blue-collar jobs, as you know. Big populist conservative. Get people to work, solar, wind, renewables, changing the way plastic is made. They're already doing a lot of that technology. So could that actually be the case, even though no prescriptions yet? It's a resolution. Everyone should know this. It's a resolution with no policy prescriptions, really.
Well, resolution means nothing because people can do all these things now if they want to. I mean, solar energy, I think, generates about 1.3% of our energy. We would dismantle contemporary society to get this done. It would cost $25 bazillion to go into every single house and change the water cooling system, the heating, give up your car, retrofit everything. It is just immature. It's something like someone in high school would write. I mean, this is not real. It can't be legislation. It's not serious. So I'm not sure why presidential candidates feel the need to support something.
Yes, why does the nuclear something you all have problems? That's the cleanest energy of all.
So this is a really ambitious plan that is looking to go to renewable electricity. And I would say let's go to renewable energy. And that still includes nuclear. And the reason for that is we want to keep all the options on the table.
Except cars and everything that we all drive. My 3 clunkers I have 3 clunkers, not 2. 3 clunkers. They're all out the window, I guess.
But it's going to be more expensive, Laura, if we don't act. We're talking about hundreds of billions of dollars in relief and recovery.
But we got a lot of people watching, regular people like parents that I had growing up. They make a lot of money, but there's regular people. They're listening to this going, oh, my God, I can't afford to live. I can barely afford to live now without working 2 jobs. And I'm not going to be able to afford any of this. So it's nice to say, like Michael Bloomberg said, we got to not do pie in the sky stuff. Bloomberg, big greeniac. I wore green, as you all know. But big greeniac. Bloomberg said, can't do the pie in the sky because you're going to turn off all these people. Maybe you can get to kind of agree on more of the truly private stuff.
Yeah, we have to believe in science, and let's say everything we're saying about the future is true, but economics also matters. There are rules to society. We can't simply discard the Constitution, discard economic realities, and just essentially kill American society, because that's what we would
kill it to save it.
Yeah, we'd have to.
Sounds like what Northam was saying.
And meanwhile, there's China and India who will not do that, and it will simply destroy us.
Sweater last word, real quick.
With all due respect, it will be cheaper if we proactively act now for the economy overall.
What do you drive?
I drive.
Quick.
The Amtrak.
Okay, you got no car. Okay, the new generation. All
Fossil
right.
fuel generation.
All right, Democrats claim they aren't for open borders, but what happens when their young new stars reveal the game? We're going to show you next.
The president does not like any form of immigration. He is criminalizing a population of people in the United States.
I'm not for open borders. I'm not for letting everybody in.
We don't want open borders.
Definitely don't want an open border. The left hates open borders. Don't you know that? But they don't want a border wall since that's Trump's idea. Well, it's a little confusing to everyone, but I think AOC can clear it all up for us.
We are standing on Native land, and Latino people are descendants of Native people, and we cannot be told and criminalized simply for our identity or our status, period.
Oh, I now get it. People illegally crossing our border cannot be held responsible. I got it. This is a really cool idea. Joining me now, Harmeet Dillon, RNC committee woman for California, and Luis Miranda, who's a former DNC comms director. Luis, I get the whole this land is your land, this land is my land, I love it, but does she really think that that is going to work as an argument? I mean, how does that bring anyone together?
Well, there's two separate issues. There's definitely a problem in how this administration is dealing with the immigration issue, creating a crisis that doesn't necessarily exist in the way that the president is presenting it. Yeah. There's obviously a humanitarian crisis. That doesn't mean it's a national security one.
If 1,000 people are coming into your home at one time, if it's your personal home, this is a personal home for all of us, right?
We're at record lows, and we can handle it.
Right.
I think
we can't. We don't have the beds. We don't have the processing centers. We cannot handle it. We can't. We're not going to debate that. That's not what
Laura, let's take the other side of this.
But I want to talk this specifically. I know you don't want to talk about what she said, because that
I do want to talk about what she said.
Is going to drive most people batty. Okay, that's where she's very clever and kind of cool, but this is where inexperience runs you over.
Well, the inexperience here really shows for one particular reason. What she's referring to could potentially be a huge problem for Native American tribes, which are very much focused on having tribal sovereignty and determining both the membership, the citizenship, and treaty responsibility.
Oh, it could be. People get it all confused. Anyone originally from Spanish origin, Puerto Ricans, Cubans, Central Americans, South Americans, Mexicans. But there's a big dispute among many in that overall group about who's authentic and who's not. I've been at the table, okay, and I've heard the arguments, and they're kind of fun arguments. But where does this all end up? And is that really where they're going with this open borders argument?
Yeah, I think AOC would be shocked to know what other members of her party think about this argument, because the senior, I was going to say senior citizens, but the seniors in the party, including Dianne Feinstein, Joe Biden, Chuck Schumer, and others, have all been on the opposite side of this issue from the position she's taking. And even historically, if AOC thinks, well, because historically my people were here, that means everybody gets to come, she'd be shocked to learn what the Incas, the Aztecs, and the Mayas did to each other. I mean, there have been wars. There have been divisions of geography, and there have been boundaries put throughout history. And if she read her history, she would know that. And I'll add one more thing. The reason that immigrants, I'm an immigrant, the reason that immigrants come to this country is because this country does have some standards and a higher quality of living and some principles that it lives by. And frankly, if we were to take down those borders and let everybody in and have any standards whatsoever, it actually would be a place that those folks wouldn't want to come to anymore. And so the American ideal requires some borders and some limitations, and I think she knows that, and I think her Democrats in her party know that. Her position is totally untenable and frankly
it's absurd. I mean, it's again, I keep quoting Bloomberg tonight, which I can't believe, but he keeps saying pie in the sky thinking. He was talking about the Green New Deal, but this, you can hopscotch over to this issue, and again, inexperience, maybe she gets excited about the issue and she goes full bore, but I think she's getting bad advice on this. But she said today, we don't have time to play it, she wanted to abolish ICE. She said that before, abolish ICE. This is at a time when we find out, of course, an MS-13, another murder happens in her district. Yet her big priority is to abolish ICE.
Well, and this, again, goes back to the mismanagement of DHS and ICE by the Trump administration, because
the murderer in her district is Trump's fault. You got to be kidding me.
We do need ICE.
Something better at me.
We do need ICE to carry out important functions. For example, at the Super Bowl, they had a lot of breaking up of human trafficking operations there.
What?
That is absurd.
We had an MS-13 individual. I know they did, but I'm talking
so why are you
her
disagreeing
own
with
district.
That?
We already talked. We talked about that's 2 nights ago. Okay.
So there are legitimate functions for ICE.
Right, but you're saying getting rid of MS-13 isn't?
When you have ICE chasing down a mom who's dropping off her kids at school instead of focusing on that MS-13 member,
three examples when that's
then I want to see that. I want to see them focus on the criminals.
Yeah, well, MS-13 is murdering Americans, and that counts. That bugs me
I'm all for that. I'm all for going after MS-13.
Give a press conference on that.
But that's not the issue.
No, people are dying in California every day because of this problem, and we need double and triple the number of ICE enforcing our laws, not less of them. I mean, it is. You are mocking the families and the people who have lost their lives, and the people whose quality of life has gone down because of this. You're talking about the Super Bowl. You are insulting people who have suffered as a result of this illegal immigration wave.
The work that they did at the Super Bowl is important, as is the work that they do breaking up criminal organizations.
We had some agreement here about
we need to have
ICE.
prioritization that's better.
My point is, AOC, just as she's excited about the Green New Deal, be excited about standing up for people victimized by crime, because I'm sure deep in her heart she's very worried about that as well. I hope I see it. Both of you, thanks so much. And Adam Schiff takes aim at House Intel Chair predecessor as he launches new investigations into President Trump. Devin Nunes here to respond next.
That pertains to any credible allegations of leverage by the Russians.
Caped Crusader himself, Congressman Adam Schiff, announcing his expansion of investigations into the Trump campaign, the Trump family, Trump businesses, and whatever else he can probe. In doing so, he leveled subtle shots at my next guest, whom he says was in the pocket of the president. Ooh, here to respond, former House Intel Chair, Congressman Devin Nunes. Congressman, what do you make of Schiff's charges?
Well, it was not a surprise that it was reopening the Russia investigation. But this is clearly an investigation, again, without a crime. We've looked for 2 years, didn't find anything at all. And what was amazing the other day is we haven't seen the press people around that much, because there's been a whole cottage industry of press people that are in the Capitol now, right? So for the first time, we show up to our business meeting just to organize, and there must have been 15 cameras down there and 30 press people, and I'm thinking, what in the world are these people doing here? Well, we found out because he announced at the business meeting that he was reopening the Russia investigation. I don't know what these people are going to do, this cottage industry of press people. They're going to have to go learn code or something, which was Obama's claim, because they're not going to have a job after this.
Well, they're going to bring Whitaker up to testify, I know, tomorrow, who's the acting attorney general. There was some fight, and I think the administration probably has some executive privilege concerns about him going up there. What can you tell us?
Well, I don't know why you would want Whitaker. He's been the acting AG for a month or whatever.
Any conversations that he had with the president on anything Mueller-related, I imagine.
But why not bring Rod Rosenstein, who started the special counsel, who it's been leaked that he's going to be leaving? Why would you not bring him in to talk about everything?
Eric Swalwell was on CNN tonight, and even Aaron Burnett pressed him about the myriad of investigations. Let's watch.
Are you worried at all, Congressman, about Democrats getting mired in these investigations, not doing other work? Right now, we've got more than 20. I put as many as we could on the screen right now. Are all of these worthwhile?
More cannot be less. When I was a prosecutor, Aaron, I would have defense attorneys come in and their client would have like 10 DUIs, and they'd say, can we just make them all go away, and he'll plead to one? And I would say, no, more is not less.
More is not less. I think people are just like, oh, he must be so smart. And what is that? That screen of investigations. That's the agenda, though. That is the agenda. And the Green New Deal.
Yeah, our committee, the Intelligence Committee, which is supposed to be looking overseas, dealing with places like China and Russia and North Korea, doing serious work. We're going to go back into Russia again with no new evidence.
There was some breaking news, by the way, from The Hill's opinion contributing editor John Solomon today about a chance meeting, Congressman, between Schiff and Fusion GPS's Glenn Simpson in Aspen last summer. Both men told Solomon it was just coincidental. What's your take?
This kind of sounds like the tarmac meeting with Bill Clinton and the former Attorney General. Glenn Simpson is at the center of our investigation into FISA abuse and other matters. So if the ranking member at the time was meeting privately with Glenn Simpson, who is the main figure in our investigation, he was the one that was being paid by the Democrats to collude with the Russians. So what they were talking about, I don't know, but can you imagine that if I was meeting off the side with some of our witnesses, can you imagine
and
what they would have...
Simpson lied to the... I mean, Simpson was lying about...
Yeah, Simpson's lied on multiple occasions. But I think most importantly, though, why would they be... This is a Democratic operative who got paid to do this. What's the ranking member, now chairman, doing meeting with this guy?
And imagine if the shoe had been on the other foot. I mean, they were talking about your meeting at the White House or conversations with the president, but this is a central figure in the investigation. It's like Jeff Sessions meeting Kislyak at a RNC cocktail. Hey, Hey, Ambassador, and that was a key meeting, wasn't it?
Right.
So it depends on whose ox is gored. Congressman, thank you so much for
Thanks,
joining
Laura.
us. And coming up, a vet suing for the right to fly the American flag. And another man wants to sue his parents for actually having him without his consent. You don't want to miss this. The Arbiter is up next. This is The Arbiter, where two attorneys argue a